Today, we're looking at, we've made it to the B's, officially, in our all the men and women of the Bible. We're going to be looking at Balaam, which will also sort of include Balak, which would also be the next one in the alphabetical order, but they go hand in hand. Then we're going to, ideally, take a look at Barak, not to be confused with Balak, which will also include Deborah. So, Balaam from Numbers 22 through 25. To start us off here. Balaam, you probably recognize that name. He is, honestly, to me, one of the most intriguing and mysterious characters in the Old Testament. Also pretty tragic. But whenever you read Numbers 22, you just realize why I might call him intriguing, because there are some things that go on here and that are mentioned here that make you scratch your head a little bit. Things that we don't have answers to. But Balaam, his name means pilgrim or devouring, or maybe the Lord of the people. Balak's name means waster or emptying or destroys. Take your pick which one you like the best. Doesn't really make much difference. But Balaam was a sorcerer from Pethor in Mesopotamia. He was also a prophet, but in some way. But he was hired by the king of Moab, who was Balak, to turn Jehovah against the people of Israel. That is what, like it says, at a glance, that's who he was. He was a prophet turned sorcerer of some kind from Pethor in Mesopotamia, all the way pretty relatively far. Mesopotamia was this general region. Well, that general region disappeared. Let's see what it says here. Numbers 22. We don't have time to read all of it, so we're just going to pick. What we're looking at him, here's what we're calling Balaam. Balaam was the man who was dumber than his dumb donkey. Yeah. Ouch. Yeah, that's how he's depicted. That's kind of what Peter says when he mentions him in 2 Peter. A dumb donkey was basically wiser than he was. But the way this plays out, chapter 22 of Numbers says that the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was in great dread of the people of Israel because they were many. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel. And he said, we're going to be devoured, destroyed, basically. Remember, we've heard what they did to the Amorites. Now they're camped at our doorstep. Something's got to be done. So it says that what he ended up doing was he sent messengers to this man named Balaam. At Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammon, presumably the Euphrates River is the river referred to there, saying, "Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they're too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." So Balaam had a reputation for being the man to get for this job. And what his job was, as he says, I know that you're a man, whoever you bless is blessed. It happens. If you bless them, they're blessed. Whoever you curse is cursed. So what I need you to do, according to the language there, is curse them. because if you curse them, they will be cursed. He sends, actually says the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand. They had a price, a present, a gift to convince Balaam to basically what he was going to do is get God to turn against them. Jehovah, their God, is obviously powerful. And the only way for us to have a chance at surviving this is if we get their God to fight for us instead of them. If you can't beat them, join them, kind of thing. Only they weren't trying to join the people of Israel. They were just trying to steal their God. So Balaam was going to find a way. Notice the fees for divination. So he had a reputation for being a diviner. He practiced divination of sorts. Although it seems to me, based on everything I see in the Old Testament, there really was no such thing. It's a scam. It was a scam then just as much as it's a scam now. Anybody who claims to talk to supernatural beings, whether they're dead, humans, or other spiritual beings, it's all a hoax. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't see anything in the Old Testament that suggests that it ever was anything but a hoax. However, he had a reputation for being able to do it. So they go there, and this is where it gets, whenever we meet Balaam himself, is where it gets interesting. And there are so many questions about this man that we would want to know. It says they got there with Balak's message, which we just read, and he told them, stay here tonight, and I'll bring back word to you as Jehovah speaks to me. And then it gets more and more intriguing. Verse 9 says, and God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? Balaam said to God, Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent me, saying, so on and so forth. So God's talking to Balaam, just like he said he was going to. Why would God talk to Balaam? Right? Remember the man who was blind that Jesus healed? He used the argument like, okay, this man is clearly from God because he's doing these things, and if he was a sinner, then God wouldn't hear him, much less talk to him. So why is God talking to Balaam? It seems that Balaam may have been, at least at one point, a prophet, a real prophet maybe, of some that God maybe used. We just don't have the answers. All we know is what we read in the text. God spoke to Balaam, and Balaam didn't seem to be too shocked about it. He said he was going to talk with God and hear from God. He did hear from God, and he's going to tell them. So basically, God says, "No, can't. What they're asking, you're not going to do it. Permission denied. Not going to happen." So Balaam got up in the morning. He said, you might as well go home. Jehovah has refused to let me go with you. So he's also doing what God said. He's actually listening and obeying what Jehovah told him. But they thought he was playing hardball, naturally. This time Balak sent more princes and more honorable princes. They came again. And verse 18 says this, even if Balak were to give me his whole house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of Jehovah, my God, to do less or more. But stay here anyway. I'll talk to him again, see what more Jehovah will say to me. But there's the intrigue. He calls Jehovah his God. This man from Mesopotamia, Jehovah my God. Let me see what, I cannot go beyond the command of Jehovah my God no matter how much money you offer me. In other words, I'm not playing hardball. I'm just being real. Just like if you go to the car dealer and they tell you the price and you're like, I can't pay that. Well, they might think, Or if you say, all I've got is this amount to spend on a car, and they think you're bartering or whatever, but you're actually just telling the truth. No, I'm serious. I cannot pay a penny over this. That's all I've got. Well, he's telling them, all I'm doing is telling you that I can't. I'm not trying to get more money. I just can't do it. I cannot go beyond the command of Jehovah my God. But I'll see if he's got anything else. Maybe he'll give me some more information, so on and so forth. It says God came to Balaam that night and said, if the men have come to call you, go on with them. But you're only going to do what I tell you to do. So now God is saying He's permitting He's going to use Balaam for His own purposes. Nothing changed, per se. He's still not allowed to do what they want him to do. That's not going to happen. Balaam will never convince Jehovah to start fighting against His people just because he asked, or some kind of offerings that he makes, or anything like that. He says, you go, but you will do nothing apart from what I tell you to do. So Balaam gets up and he goes. This is where it gets confusing. Because all of a sudden it says God's anger was kindled because he went. A lot of people get tripped up on that part. He just told him to go. Now he got mad when he went. That might make sense in human terms, right? Well, yeah, I said to go. I wasn't serious. I didn't think they'd actually do it, I didn't mean for them to actually do it. But they did, and I'm mad about it. Well, God doesn't work like that. So, obviously, there was something about his going that made God angry that was not right. It seems probably that God knew that he was still going with the idea, I'm still going to be trying to get this to happen, to get what they want me to do to happen, even though God already told him no. And he had other plans in mind. So he's going to send Balaam a message. So here he is. This is the part that's well known, or somewhat well known. His legacy, anyway. He's riding on his donkey. Riding down the road. Suddenly it says, the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah. Excuse me, I forgot this part, verse 22. God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of Jehovah took his stand in the way of his adversary. Not in the way, he wasn't standing there as his helper, he was standing there as his adversary. The donkey saw the angel of Jehovah standing in the road with his sword drawn. The only reason you would have your sword drawn is if you're going to be using it. Donkey saw it. But the thing is, Balaam didn't. He couldn't see it, the angel. The donkey turned aside out of the road, started going down the field. Getting off the road, here I go. I'm going this way. Donkey didn't say anything, Not that that's going to always be that way in this particular case. The donkey did what a donkey would do, I guess. Something is standing in the way, something that I'm not crazy about. I'm just going to turn and go. Walk around maybe.
This thing says that God has told them that if the men come to call on you, you go with them. But he just went of his own accord. Like he didn't wait for them to come call on him, because he just got up the next day and went. And like that's what God was upset about.
Well, I would say that's wrong. Because
it does say, like, God did say, call on you, and then it says, so he got up the next morning and went to him.
yeah, he says, if the men have come to call you to go with them, go. Is what verse 20 says. It doesn't say if they call you again. He says if they're here to call you to go. That seems to be the case, because it can't be that God was just angry because he went, because he just told it to go. So there's something else going on here that God was angry about. So maybe we would say the manner in which he went his heart was not right, which is going to be clear from this whole thing, that He had knowledge of sorts. His heart was not right. So, angel's in the road. Donkey sees, he doesn't. He hits the donkey and says, what in the world, go, quit, what are you doing? Get back on the road. They keep moving. Donkey sees the angel again. This time it says, in a narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on either side. When the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah, she pushed against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. Now she can't turn off into the field. There's nowhere to go. So she's just, I'm not going any farther. I'm going to press up against the wall. There his foot pressed against the wall, hits her again. Then the angel of Jehovah went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left at all, I guess, even more narrow. When the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah, she just lay down. I'm not going. I'm just going to lay down. Not going another step. Balaam's anger was kindled. He struck the donkey with his staff. Presumably the other times he didn't do that. But this time he hit her with his staff. And all of a sudden, a miracle happened. Jehovah opened the mouth of the donkey. And the donkey did not say hee-haw. The donkey spoke words, which donkeys cannot do. Not just because they're donkeys and animals don't talk, because they physically can't talk. They don't have what's needed to be able to speak words. That's why they say hee-haw, because that's what God made them to say. This donkey's talking in the language that Balaam speaks and is speaking reason to him. What have I done to you that you've struck me these 3 times? And the most amazing part, perhaps, is that he answers the donkey. And his answer wasn't, why are you talking? And what, did they slip me some kind of drug or something? Because all of a sudden my donkey's talking to me. He answers the donkey. But maybe that just shows the pride of Balaam, that he wasn't that shocked when Jehovah spoke to him. He wouldn't be that shocked if the gods of Moab spoke to him. I would presume to say he's not shocked when a donkey talks to him, because that's the kind of man he is. He's got this gift or something, I don't know. But long story short as it can be at this point, suddenly God opens his eyes and he sees the angel standing in the way with this drawn sword in his hand. He bowed down and fell on his face. And he's told now, he says the same thing the donkey did first. He says, the donkey saw me and turned aside before me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let her live. She saved your life. Your dumb donkey that you've been hitting saved your life. Balaam says, I've sinned. For I did not know that you stood in the road against me. That is more true than he realized, because it was true in the literal sense. I didn't see you standing there, but he also apparently, maybe the part of this confession that's true that he did not let seep into his heart, was that was also true of everything he was doing. He doesn't see God standing in his way. Or at least he's ignoring. He's choosing not to see God, even though he's doing exactly what God had already told him he's not going to do. So his confession was more true than he realized, or true in more ways than he realized. He says, if it's evil in your sight, I'll turn back. I'll go home if you want. God's got other plans. He says, no, I want you to go. But now, instead of saying you're going to do nothing but what I tell you, he says the only thing you're going to do at all is speak. And the only thing you're going to speak is the word that I tell you to speak. That was true for all prophets of Jehovah, true prophets. But in this sense, he means literally, the only thing that's coming out of your mouth is the thing that I make come out of your mouth. This may be the only time where God actually took over, so to speak, or seems to be actually, made something come out of somebody's mouth that they literally didn't have any control over. It seems anyway. So he says that's how it's going to be. The story, sadly, is not over. Obviously, every time he opened his mouth, it was the opposite of a curse. He wasn't cursing, he was speaking forth the word of God. He says, the word that God puts in my mouth, that must I speak. Not that will I speak. That's what Micaiah said. All I can say is what God tells me to say. But here he says, I must speak. There's nothing that's going to come out except whatever word God puts in my mouth. Yep.
Well, verse 32 tells us, and he says, because your ways are perverse. So the Lord knew the intent of his heart. And he knew, and so what he's basically telling you is like, I know what you're thinking. And you could have died for that.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to let you go, but you make sure this time you stay within the bounds.
Yeah. I've come out, even though I told you to go, I've come out to stand in your way, oppose you, because I know what you're up to. Which also seems to, that makes perfect sense with the earlier verse that said God's anger was kindled. That would be the explanation. His way is perverse. He knows what he's doing. He went along with what God said, but he's also got this other scheming plan he's got, and God's telling him, I know. So every time he speaks these oracles, chapter 23, he speaks the oracle. He also, he seems to, the crazy thing is he seems to still be going on with as if none of this ever happened. He says, build 7 altars. He did his homework, it seems to me. Somehow he knew 7 was an important number to God. It's a symbolic, special number. 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams, and so on and so forth. But then, God obviously didn't want any of these offerings. He was not pleased with it. But he put a word in his mouth, and he spoke an oracle. He said, how can I curse whom God has not cursed? It's a pretty good question. Pretty good point. How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? You're asking me to do something that, how could I do that? There's a lot of truth in that too. Kind of going back to us talking about forgiveness. How can I forgive somebody that God's not forgiven? Why would I think I have the right to forgive somebody if God hasn't forgiven them? Which is why repentance is a necessary part of the forgiveness process. Then he goes on, second oracle, third oracle, final oracle, and then it seems that it's over. Failure. Which it was. Balaam did not convince God, Jehovah, to turn against and fight against Israel. But it's not over. This is the tragic part for the people of Israel anyway. Balaam apparently definitely did his homework. And he knew, maybe I can't get God to turn on them. But if I get them to turn on God, the same result will happen. How did he know that? We don't know. But he did, because that was his plan, it seems. It doesn't necessarily connect him to what happens in chapter 25, but it seems, at least as it starts out, it just seems too much of a coincidence that they were swayed. Well, he wanted to do what he set out to do, if he had any part in this, but maybe it was just coincidence. But while they were getting Israel, Jehovah to turn on Israel was the objective. The irony, I guess, is maybe all of Balaam's efforts end with the oracles, but then all of a sudden they end up turning against God in idolatry and sinful practices with the people of the land. And guess what happened? The anger of Jehovah was kindled against Israel. And the irony is it happened anyway. Because they had been swayed to do what God said will result in my anger and wrath. So whether Balaam had anything to do with that or not, it's ironic. I don't think he was changed. No. He was a puppet at this point. God was using him as a mouthpiece. Yeah, he said, I've sinned. And maybe that was genuine, but it doesn't seem. God said, your way's perverse. He says, no, I'm going to let you go. But the only thing that's going to come out of your mouth is what I make come out of your mouth. And so the things that he says from chapter 23 to 20 and 24 were not really something that was coming from his heart. It was coming from God. And there's really doesn't seem to be a record of him coming around wholeheartedly or anything like that. He was a self-willed man. He was double-minded.
So that's a good reference, I guess, that you could for all intents and purposes, your fruits of your life could appear very of doing all the right things,
Or saying all the right things.
but inside you're still selfishly motivated and only God can see that part.
Yeah, the reference here is 31:16. It says about the deal with Midian. It says, behold, these on Balaam's advice caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against Jehovah in the incident of Peor, and so the plague came among the congregation of Jehovah. That happened, it says, the thing that happened in chapter 25 is because Balaam said it. That was all Balaam. That's the reference. It doesn't connect them here as chapter 25 begins, but in hindsight, chapter 31, verse 16 says, the thing that happened at Peor, which is chapter 25, happened at Balaam's advice. Balaam was the mastermind behind that plan. So even though he failed to turn God against the people, he succeeded in turning the people against God, which in turn turned God against the people. So in a way, in an earthly sense, he won. But it was utterly wicked, evil, what he did, and he will and has paid for it, just as everybody who does such things will. He was overcome by sin. That reference in 2 Peter 2 refers to him as sinful in that way, not as penitent or anything like that. So, lessons. You reap what you sow. There's one. Galatians 6, whatever one sows, that will he also reap. What we do will be turned on our own heads eventually. So Balaam had a pretty good opportunity to turn his life around, but he didn't. Somehow. And we might think, how in the world? He saw an angel of Jehovah, the angel of Jehovah. He spoke with God. How could somebody be so blind? Well, we could ask that with a lot of things. I'll tell you, the number one way that somebody can be so blind is because they make themselves blind. They want to be blind. That's it. Don't ever underestimate the power that we have over ourselves. We can make ourselves blind to something if we want to be. Even if the counter or the argument, the contrasting argument is right in there in our face, if we don't want to see it, we won't see it. So apparently he didn't want to, or maybe he thought he was so cunning and clever that he could get away with it or something. But you can't outsmart God, no matter who you are. They sow the wind, Hosea 8:7. They sow the wind and they shall reap the whirlwind. You sow the wind, but you're going to reap a hurricane. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep. He knew better. And that's another lesson we could probably learn that might fall into one of these. But, just because you know, there's more than just knowing. Knowing is a crucial step, but just what you know does not necessarily mean that what you do is right. Mm-hmm.
This section also points out to you God has a plan and has had it since Genesis. And it's going to go exactly the way He says it's going to go. In Psalms 2, when He sits up there and He watches the wars going, all these people doing what they want, and laughs at Him because He knows what He's going to do and how He's going to do it. And don't you ever think that, even though we are here, Jesus and God and the Spirit are still active and very real. And they are around doing things. Just because we can't see the angel, just because our eyes can't see that there's something going on around us, that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so it does make you think when you worry about stuff and whatever, I'm going to do this, and it's like, no, He's got it.
Yep. And maybe that was also a lesson for Balaam of how spiritually blind he was. Just in the way you couldn't see me, but your donkey did. You need to open your eyes in general, spiritually and physically, but especially spiritually for Balaam. Number two, even if we are instrumental in bringing about some purpose of God, our hearts can still condemn us. Hebrews 3:12, take care, brothers, lest there be in any one of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. Paul suggested, or seemed to suggest in one instance, how, I labor daily, I'm always working, striving to please God, lest, I work to save all these people, and then in the end, I myself am lost. Even if God uses you, you could save a lot of people, preach the truth to a lot of people, your heart could still end up condemning you anyway. Number three, even the clearest knowledge without grace is worthless. That goes back to knowing is not enough. Balaam knew. I think the handout, the thing says he had a head full of light, but his heart was dark. A heart full of darkness. He had the knowledge. He had the eloquence. He said the right things, both to people and to God. Right? He said, I've sinned. If you want me to, I'll turn back. He said everything right. He said all the right things. But his heart was black, darkness. His motives, his intent was corrupt. The presence of sin is ruinous, especially covetousness. Maybe that had a lot to do with it. Remember, he was offered a pretty nice price. Not to mention the fame. He already had the infamy of, why him? Why Balaam, this man from Mesopotamia? He had a reputation. And so he had some glory as far as that goes. A lot of things were obviously tempting him to go through with this, even though he had to, a face-to-face encounter with God, saying, no, I'm not pleased with this. So the presence of any sin is ruinous to a person. That's why there's so much emphasis in Scripture about getting rid of that. For your sake and for other people's sake. Number 5, even the most pious wishes are sometimes vain. Jesus said, be careful lest the light in you be darkness. There's a tough one of the teachings of Jesus. What? Take care lest the light in you be darkness? It's kind of like how Paul said, be careful so that this liberty of yours doesn't end up being sin, or be careful that this right of yours doesn't lead your brother to sin, because, be careful lest the light in you be darkness. That's how it was with Balaam. Like we said, he had the knowledge, but did it come out? Nope. Corruption, darkness. Finally, we're obviously not getting to Balak, by the way, so we'll save them for next week. To die well, one must live well. If you want to die well, you have to live well. Let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, Paul said. He said, walk in a manner worthy of God, who calls you into His own kingdom and glory. And again, Colossians 1:10, walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. So there's 3 times, and more could probably be produced. Walk in a manner that is worthy of God's Word, of God Himself, fully pleasing to Him, bearing fruit in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God. So if you want to die well, you have to live well. I think it may be in one of the oracles. I didn't write it down or reference it, but a reference to wanting to die the death of a righteous man. He wanted to die the death of a righteous man. Well, you can't die the death of a righteous man if you don't live the life of a righteous man. I guess everybody, if they're honest with themselves, would want to die the death of a righteous man, whatever that might mean in their minds. Yeah, die as a righteous man, but die the death of a righteous man. Well, he could have, if he had lived the life of a righteous man.
It's just like how the fruit of a dead tree is like, you know what I'm trying to say? A dead tree can't bear good, even like if you're sinful, like even your good fruits are not in vain.
Yeah, Jesus said a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. If it's a bad tree, the fruit will be bad. There's no other option. If you want to have the good fruit, you've got to be a good tree. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. We talked about in a couple weeks ago, or last week maybe, how the prayers, the one who turns his ear away from hearing the law, even his prayers are an abomination to God. Well, I think the same could probably be said of fruits. As far as God is concerned, yes, he delights, He wants good things to be done to people. But as far as God's acceptance, one who turns his ear away from hearing the law, why would his fruits be pleasing to God? Why would his good works be pleasing to God if he is evil in every other way? And that would go for worship. If I turn my ear away from hearing the law, makes my prayer an abomination to God, surely that would apply to worship too. One who turns his ear away from hearing the law, his worship is an abomination to God. In fact, God Himself said that in so many words when the people did turn their ear away from hearing the law. And He said, stop coming to the temple to work. Stop. I don't want it. I hate your songs. I hate your sacrifices. I don't want any of it because you are not listening to me. You're not doing what I have said, what I've commanded you. So stop with your rituals and your sacrifices. Stop pretending and telling yourselves that I'm pleased with them or you, because I'm not. Because you're not doing what I've said. Mm-hmm.
And rightly so, we recognize that baptism is an act of grace, where I think you said it a couple weeks ago, whatever, all the work is done by God. But how important it is every Sunday, as the Lord commanded, when we partake of communion, we are told to examine ourselves. Any course correction, the heart has to be corrected at that point, and only we can look into it to see whether what we're doing is aligned, which is pleasing to God, or whether it's not. But how important it is to continually have that blood and His body within us. I mean, it's separate when we take it, but when we take it, it's now in us so that Christ lives in us. But it has to have a course correction every week.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah,
Not with communion, but every day we need to check ourselves. And there's only one way to do that, and that's with God's standard. And that's why it is so important not to be blind like Balaam was. He, again, said all the right things, sounded pious, sounded prophetic and religious and godly, but look at his life, look at his fruits. Yes, sir. Yeah. So quite a history there. And I guess we could learn a lesson from Balak too, that you can't fight against God and win. You can fight against Him, you won't win. No matter what you do, no matter who you hire, no matter what famous preacher you hire to try to outsmart God and teach something against God, you can't do it. You can succeed in, condemning everybody who believes that teaching to hell, because that's all that's happening when we try to out-teach God or correct God, fight against God in that way. The only thing you're succeeding in is robbing people of the hope of heaven through the truth. The truth is what sets us free, and whenever we are deprived of the truth, either from ourselves or from others, we don't have the hope of being set free. So we have to open up our eyes and let ourselves see not just the truth of the Scriptures, but how it applies in our lives and the things this thing that I'm used to doing, I maybe shouldn't do anymore because I know better. Now I know what's right and the way I should behave in this situation, in this situation, in this situation. Don't be dumber than a donkey.